So far in this unit called homeostasis, we're looking at how our bodies, so human, it's mostly a focus on human bodies and how they can keep the environment of our internal systems within range of giving us optimal conditions for all the reactions that go inside our body. So our first three units really dealt with a lot of the really important functions, chemical reactions, metabolism going on inside of our body. But in order for those to run at their optimal conditions, there has to be a certain temperature, pH range, and conditions that our body has to stay in. So that's what homeostasis means. It's keeping our bodies at within range for optimal reactions to happen. Life that give us life, basically. So you guys looked at some of the systems that are in place. So the types of systems. I think I started you off with looking at control mechanisms. So we have things called positive feedback and we have things called negative feedback that will either lower a situation or increase a situation that's happening depending on our body's needs. And the second thing I had you look at was we're going to look at in this unit three main systems. So in grade 11 biology, you guys looked at the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the circulatory system. And so in grade 12, when we look at the major systems, we're adding into it the excretory system. So our excretory system is one that I've left you with already, which was the kidney. That was just one part of our excretory system. We excrete things in many different ways, but one of them is our urine output, and that's what excretory system we're focusing on in this course. And then we're going to move into our endocrine system. So there's three main ones: excretory, endocrine. Endocrine is just a fancy term for all the hormones and chemicals inside of our bodies that get sent through our bloodstream for signals for certain reactions to happen. And then the final system we're looking at is our central nervous system. So really basically our brain and the control of all the functions in our body from our brain and spinal cord. So those are the three systems that really make up this unit. And as for the kidney, I left you guys with diagram of the main functioning unit within our kidneys, which were the nephrons, and how our blood makes it from our heart through to our kidneys to be filtered and processed and get rid of all of the wastes that have to come out through our urine. And it's a really intricate system. And the best way that you guys can do it is exactly what I gave you, is to look at the diagrams, read what happens in each part of that nephron, and then to try and analyze somebody's blood and urine samples to see what sorts of things might have happened. So kind of a real life situation applying to what might go wrong along that path from our heart to our urine. And so now what we're going to look at is something called water balance. So you know that our body is made up of at least 75% water. So how does our body maintain that level? If we are low or if we're high, what are the things that are in place? So the control of water in our body is a result of two of the systems that we're talking about. One is our nervous system. Our central nervous system is made up of our brain, our nerves, and our spinal cord plays a big role as well. We're going to look at this system a little bit later on, but you do need to know that it plays an important part in balancing water in our bodies. And then the second main system, which we're going to talk about next, is the endocrine system. So we balance the amount of water within our body on these two systems. Our brain is part of it, and our hormones or chemicals that get sent around our body are. And the big part of the endocrine system, and what you might start to find a little overwhelming, is the number of hormones that you need to know. And these are probably all very new to you, and you're going to have to spend some time, you're going to have to set aside some time to quiz yourself on what these hormones are, what they do. And then the bigger thing that you're going to want to focus on and spend some time is, where are these hormones produced? But where's their target? Like, they're produced in one part of your body and they're meant for a specific purpose. That purpose is probably somewhere else in your body, and it has to travel through your bloodstream to get there. So there's a lot to know about hormones, and you might find that part of the unit a little overwhelming just because it's a lot of content. So you'll have to set aside some time to look at that. So the first hormone that's involved in water balance. So right now we're just strictly talking about what's involved in balancing the water in our body. There's something called ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, and basically the hypothalamus, which is a part you're going to learn about of your brain, detects changes in osmotic pressure. Remember, osmosis is the movement of water across membranes. And so what happens is, let's just say that you stop drinking water, or you have stopped ingesting things that have a water content. So now your body is lacking water. What happens is the concentration in your blood, so the concentration of solids in your blood starts to go up. Because remember, concentration is basically how many, maybe I can just draw a little picture here. If we're talking about the concentration of absolutely anything, so if we think of, and let's just use a beaker of something. So we have a beaker, we have water in it, and we've got some dissolved solutes. Solutes is just the term for the solid particles inside of a liquid. If we decrease the amount of water, let's say we have half the water, but we have the same number of solutes, that didn't change. What that means is that there's a higher concentration here, and that's what happens in our blood. So if we stop ingesting water, all of the dissolved solids that were already in our blood, the concentration of them becomes higher because you have less water. So increased concentration of our blood solutes, and therefore we end up with a larger osmotic pressure. Okay, and it signals a part of our brain called the hypothalamus, and it shrinks. Those cells shrink, okay, because water is being released to try and fill back that concentration that was there. And so what happens is a nerve signal is sent to another part of our brain called the pituitary to release this hormone. And this hormone signals the nerves to signal you to say, I'm thirsty, and that helps you recognize that you're actually thirsty and that you need to drink some water. So there's part of what helps to balance the water. And another thing that's happening while we have a decreased water intake or decreased amount of water in our body is that our kidneys are affected and sense that change in blood pressure. So as soon as we are lacking water in our body, our blood pressure decreases and reduces oxygen and nutrients to important tissues. So why does our blood pressure decrease? This is one of those feedback mechanisms. So from the reduced water intake, our blood pressure, the pressure in our blood of flowing through our body has decreased because we've got less water content. And basically receptors near the glomerulus, that part of your nephron, produces an enzyme that makes something called angiotensin. Okay, this is another hormone that helps to constrict. So whenever we see this word constrict, it means makes them smaller. So it constricts your blood vessels, and what happens is it increases the water reabsorption. Remember that part of your filtering urine? There's a part that we travel through the nephron where if water is needed in our body, we will reabsorb it back into the nephron. And that's decreasing the amount of urine output. So you'll notice, if you think of a real life application, when you drink a lot of water, you end up having to urinate more as well. When you don't drink a lot of water, your body tries to hold on to as much water as possible, and that's what's happening in the filtering of your blood and urine. Your body will actually grab back whatever water it can and keep it in your body if it needs it. And if you are drinking lots and lots of water, you'll notice that you urinate a lot more because your body's happy, it's got what it needs, and so it's just going to expel what it doesn't need. Okay, so that kind of helps to explain what happens when water intake is low and what sorts of things and hormones are in place to sort of help those feedback mechanisms. And the one other thing is when we are decreasing and increasing concentrations of things in our body, it can affect our pH. So remember how acidic or how basic something is? This is an important reaction that happens. So remember from our last unit when we talk about cellular respiration, one of our end products is carbon dioxide. The problem with keeping a lot of carbon dioxide in our body is that it can turn into something called carbonic acid, and that lowers the pH. So remember, a low pH means we're acidic. If we're forming more acid in our body and in our blood, then we have we're bringing our body out of range of where it best reacts. Okay, so for instance, our body reacts best at a certain temperature, it reacts best at a certain pH, and if we have any reactions going on inside our body that bring it outside of that range, we're not working at our optimal amounts for all of these reactions. So what happens is your body has something called a bicarbonate carbon dioxide buffer system. Bicarbonate, remember, any acid term, so carbonic acid, also has a term for it that ends in 8. And so remember, I think I've talked about this when we talked about the Krebs cycle. We have citrate is one of the compounds that forms. Well, it's the same as saying citric acid. So remember, anything that has an acid also has an 8 form of its word. So what this is showing us here, this buffer, a buffer basically tries to keep things in range. As soon as it senses something going either higher pH or lower pH, a buffer will try and keep it within the range that it needs to. And our body has this system. And here's what reactions are happening. So we have carbon dioxide being produced in our body. Okay, and when we have a lot of it, we end up moving the reaction in this direction. So you'll see these arrows here mean that the reaction can go in both directions. And so what our body has in place is that if we have a lot of carbon dioxide, it flows in this direction. And what we end up doing is converting carbon dioxide into carbonic acid. And we don't like that. But our body has sensors in place that when we produce too much carbonic acid, there's a bicarbonate buffer system, and this increases in concentration, throwing the reaction in the opposite direction. So it's going to throw it back into making water and carbon dioxide. So depending on what type of pH our bodies are going to be reacting best at, this system will help compensate. If it starts to move in one direction, it can push either of these reactions in either direction, so that your body can stay at a pH that it's meant to stay at. And that is around neutral. Okay,